Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, everyone. I hope everyone had a meaningful time during the open webinar. I'm Yeonju Park, the External Relations and Foundation Assistant of the EAAFP Secretariat. Okay, welcome to today's Day 1 in-depth workshop. The workshop will be about engaging local communities in the conservation of migratory waterbirds and wetlands. I will be the first moderator for the workshop. So before we start, let me introduce our youth organization team for Think Tank competition. There are 9 members, including me, Jura, today's moderators, Yumi and Yuji, who are tomorrow's moderators, Vivian, who mainly manages this project, Yun, Ho, Jord, and Orca. Before we start the workshop, please make sure to follow the instruction on the screen. Yeah, change your Zoom profile name with your name and country, and mute your microphone when it's not your turn to speak. Also, please kindly note that the session is being recorded, as you can see. You can turn off the camera if you don't want to appear in the recording. However, we recommend you turn on the camera so that we can interact easily. Also, if you have any questions or comments, please use the chat box so we can answer you shortly, or your questions will be answered after the presentations. So we would like to have a short ice-breaking session now. We found that all of you were from various countries along the EAA Flyway, such as the Philippines and Indonesia. Would you go to the next slide? Okay, so please mark your home country on the world map of the shared screen so that we could see where our participants are from. So you can use toolbar and click stamp. So it has some heart shape stamp or other shapes. You can please feel free to mark your home countries on the world map now.
Great. I see a lot of indication of arrows, hearts, stars in the middle of our flyway.
It seems all of you have marked your countries on the map, and we have participants from the Philippines, China, Malaysia, and other countries as well. So I'm really looking forward to listening to your insightful discussions based on your experiences from various backgrounds. Okay, so this is the timetable for today's workshop. Ms. Mercy Kariuki, today's speaker, will give a presentation, and Mr. George will share the related cases to help your discussion. Before we start, let's take a group photo. So please stop sharing the screen. Yeah, please turn on your camera. Yeah, so please smile at the cameras, and I will count down 3. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, one more. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you all for your smiles. And now I would like to introduce our trainer, Miss Mercy Kariuki. So would you share the screen? Yeah, thank you. So she is currently working as the program officer of BirdLife International headquarters. She has been working on supporting community-led conservation initiatives between BirdLife partners, developing community conservation projects and proposals, managing projects, and meeting local communities to conduct capacity assessments, among other activities that involve community engagement for about 10 years. As an expert who has a great interest in community conservation work and various experiences in the field, she will guide us how to engage local communities in the conservation of migratory waterbirds and wetlands. Ms. Mercy, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Park, for that great introduction. Hi, everyone. Yeah, okay. So as today's topic is about conservation and how to engage local communities in our activities. So I'll try to share my experience or try to take you through this short training, which, to be honest, it takes more than 2 hours to be able to really understand how the basics of community engagement, but I'll try as much as possible to give you the basics and to give you some insights on how you can engage local communities in your respective project that you're currently working on. So as an introduction, we are currently facing the 6th mass extinction. This has been recorded by different assessments, the Global Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services Assessment. And this is an indication that as the world is going through different activities or going through different impacts, and biodiversity loss is seen as a global problem and is driven by patterns of development at local level. And just to mention that different communities or different countries experience different levels of development that impact biodiversity in general, but also as part of, as an issue of biodiversity loss, we have different other drivers that affect the biodiversity loss, which include land use changes, of exploitation of resources, climate changes, which is currently a major global issue or global environmental issue. We also have other impacts of biodiversity loss, including marine plastic pollution and invasive species. Just to mention that different, as I said earlier, different communities, different countries and localities experience different conservation issues or biodiversity loss impacts. And each locality also has its own ecology and pattern of development. And thus local communities are often the best, they're usually in best places to come up with solution or develop solution that can help both development issues and conservation issues. And as an example, in Asia Pacific region, we have about 200 million people depending on natural resources for their survival. And in this case, this is just to highlight that how important local communities are in the issues of conservation, and also how important they are in ensuring that their livelihoods are considered or they are factored in when it comes to biodiversity conservation and when it comes to any management of resources, both locally, regionally, and globally. And also just to mention that as the local communities are the focal point for any conservation work, the ecosystem plays a critical part in their livelihood, as most communities depend on these natural resources for either providing energy for them through collecting firewood, but also getting resources that they can use to either produce product that they can be able to sell, or also materials that they can use for their, for example, housing materials. So this is just, as the first introduction has mainly been trying to show how important or how critical local communities are as part of conservation, any biodiversity conservation element. And another point to really emphasize is biodiversity conservation is essentially a social process, which means that we cannot be able to separate conservation and local communities or conservation and people, because they both go hand in hand and they both affect each other in either positively or negatively, as you're going to see in my next slides. So yeah, so just going straight to conservation and people, which is our main focus of today's workshop. How do we engage local communities in conservation? How does conservation affect local communities and vice versa? So I'll just start by asking you a few questions or something that can help you to go through the next 2 hours or so. So think about places where you're working for your current projects, for conservation projects, either for you're conserving a wetland, or you're conserving a specific species, or you're trying to trying to mitigate or coming up with a solution of, for example, human and bird life or human and bird conservation conflict. So just think about those places. Are there people living near or near these places? What do you think the implications are for your projects or organization whose objective is to conserve nature and in these places? So generally, I'm just trying to open up the conversation, or trying to open up today's workshop by trying to put you in a position to think through I know most of your projects or some of your projects are directly linked to local communities. Either there's a conflict between the communities and a specific bird species, or a community and trying to conserve a wetland, which probably it has essential or critical species that the communities depend on. So just trying to understand, in every conservation or in every conservation project that you're working on, are there communities living nearby, or are there communities that you're going to be working with them directly, and how your project is going to impact their lives directly or indirectly? So this takes me to our first activity, which links to what I've just said, trying to understand what are the positive or the negative impacts of conservation to people, and vice versa. How can conservation projects affect the local communities, and how can local communities affect our objectives in conservation or your objectives in conservation projects? So I think, Vivian, you can help me with breaking out the groups, but just to take you through the 4 questions. How might local communities positively affect the success of conservation activities? So think through your current project that you're working on. How might local communities positively affect the success of your project, and how might they negatively affect the success of your conservation project? And the other question that you might think about is, how might conservation activities that you're dealing with affect the communities positively, and how can the activities affect the communities negatively? So again, this is more of think through, like you have a conservation project. Think both sides. Think about the people and think about the conservation objectives that you have. How might both of them affect each other?
So
yeah, I think now.
I am going to create the groups now, and if the participant can rename your Zoom name here to add the country names that you're from, that will help me to allocate you so that you can interact more with people from different countries. So if you can, please help me to change the name from your with your country name included.
Yeah, welcome back, everyone. Do you have everyone on board now?
Yes, we are on board. Aye.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Thank you for taking part in the first activity to try and understand both the negative and positive impacts of communities to conservation and vice versa. That is, conservation activities, how do they affect the local communities? And I hope the exercise has given you an opportunity to think critically, or to think through on how your projects or conservation projects in different flyways, or different working on different wetland waterbirds is going to affect the local communities. I'll give you a few minutes at some point to give us your feedback. But as of now, we'll continue with the presentation. Let's see. So when it comes to conservation and people, there's one aspect that I really want us to go through that is increasingly gaining a lot of attention within the conservation network and within activities that involve local communities and their rights, and that is human rights. And conservation can help us to realize people's basic needs or basic human rights to, for example, food, water, resources that they depend on for their medical treatment or even their cultural activities, and also to give them a standard way of living. And by empowering people to realize their rights, it can provide an enabling environment for meeting conservation objectives of your projects. And this is, as I said earlier, this is ensuring that the local communities feel that they are part and parcel, or they feel that their basic human rights are considered in the conservation activities or the conservation projects that you're working on. And just to emphasize that human rights is becoming a very critical aspect in currently in conservation. And we need to really, as conservationists or as people working in conservation, we really need to consider how we impact or how we engage the communities to ensure that their rights are not violated. And therefore conservation, as I said earlier, conservation is increasingly adopting a human right-based approach. And I would like to take you through a specific concept called FPIC. And this is a short form of free, prior, informed consent. And this particular this particular aspect was adopted in 2007 by the UN General Assembly to realize or recognize indigenous people's rights for any activity that affects the ancestral land, terrestrials, and also natural resources. So in a nutshell, this is a concept that came in to ensure that the local communities or the indigenous people's rights are considered, or the communities are involved in any conservation activities that any organization comes in that affect their land or that they affect their natural resources. So I'll try and take you through this particular concept and what it is and what it's not, and also what are the benefits for ensuring that the local communities are part and parcel of any conservation activities. So to begin with, free, by using the word free, it means that we should not coerce, or we should not intimidate or manipulate or even threat the local communities to be part of any conservation activities that you're taking part in. So may it be you're trying to rehabilitate a wetland or you're trying to conserve a specific forest. The communities should be able to have the free will. They should not be able to feel that they are free to engage in that particular activities, and not, we shouldn't, as conservationists, you shouldn't go to the communities and threaten them that, you know what, if you're not conserving this forest, we're kicking you out, or you're doing ABCD. So it's more of like the communities need to feel free and feel that they're part and parcel of any conservation activities or project that you're working on. When it comes to using the word prior, it means that any communities has a right to have to make their own decision, and also to be part of the decision making for any intervention that concerns their community before its implementation. Again, this means that even before you start your conservation project, you should take time to involve the communities way before. This means that you're trying to ensure that your conservation objectives, your conservation aims, your conservation activities are well understood by the communities even before you start engaging them. Informed, when it comes to also the word informed, it means that any communities has the right to be provided with and to have sufficient information on matters that concern them and their livelihoods to allow the communities to make informed decisions. So this goes hand in hand with the previous word, that it's prior, meaning that the community should feel that they have the right information, that they have the information that is needed to make a decision, and that they have enough time for them to be able to know these activities, the conservation activities that you're working on, how does it, or how will it impact their livelihoods, or how will it impact their accessibility to natural resources. And the final word is consent. So affected communities have a right to give or withhold their consent at any decision that will impact their lands. So even after the communities feel that your conservation activities, they're aware about it, they have the information, they have a right to say no at any particular time, as long as they feel that this activity, your conservation activity, is affecting their livelihoods negatively, or your activities is not going, or they're not going as agreed in the previous steps. So that means that in any activities, in any conservation projects that you're going to be working with the local communities, or even that you're currently working with the communities, you should try and ensure that the communities, or you should try and ensure that this concept, FP concept, is clearly understood in every step, or in every community, that they understand that they have the right to say no, they have the right to say yes at any particular time of the project and at any particular time of the activities that is going on. And they have the right to, at the moment, anytime that they feel that a conservation activities is affecting them, in a way that they were not expecting, negatively, especially, they have the right to say no, or they have the right to say stop, and can we go back and review the activities or review the objectives of the project. As I said earlier, FPIC is an essential tool to protect human rights, to protect the rights of human, environmental, and customary rights of all communities affected, and most especially the vulnerable communities who 100% depend on natural resources for their survival. And prior to project implementation, FPIC ensures that the identification of affected communities using participatory assessment tools to understand and document the social demographics and the historical, political, and cultural dynamics of an area. So by using the concept or using FPIC, it ensures that you're able to understand the social dynamics of a community, to be able to understand how do they operate, how do they live as a social being, how do political issues affect them. So FPIC is not only just a one-off activity, it helps you to understand, and it helps you to be able to shape up your project, to be able to work in a way that your projects, by the end of when it comes to the end of your project activities, it has impacted the communities in a positive way and in a long-term goal. And again, FPIC process guarantees the equal consideration of various perspectives held within affected communities. Again, by using the FPIC, you ensure that you've factored in every aspect, or you've factored in every issues that each community has. As we know, communities are very dynamic, and they're not static. So each community is either the elderly or the young people, the youth, the women, they have different roles in our communities. And by engaging them through the FPIC process, you ensure that you understand their priorities, and you make sure that each group is involved in making decision. So just to point out what FPIC is not, FPIC is not, as in a sense, it's not the same thing as negotiation or consultation, because you might find that some people might consider, oh, I've negotiated with the communities. For example, if the project is about forest conservation and you don't want the communities, or you're trying to reduce the impact of forest deforestation or cutting down the forest, and then you might want to just go and talk to a few communities and negotiate with them, oh, you shouldn't cut trees on specific area in this forest, and you consider that as FPIC. No, FPIC is more of like, as I said earlier, you have to engage the communities in every step. And again, FPIC is not a one-way process by just ticking a box in your checklist of activities that you need to do in the project implementation. It's a process it's a continuous process, and a process that has to be engaging throughout. And again, FPIC is not an individual right, but rather a collective right. A collective right because it involves the communities as a whole. It involves different groups in a community. It involves the project implementers. It involves even the government officials or any other conservation organization that is working within the area. So what are some of the benefits of what are some of the benefits of FPIC process? So it helps to maintain consent and prevents risk or conflicts within the communities, but it also builds trust between the project implementers or the project managers and beneficiaries, and it ensures the sustainability and ownership of the project or intervention that you're working in. Because again, as long as, or as you engage the communities, they try and buy in, or they try to feel that they're part and parcel of your conservation initiative. And thus it ensures that there's a sustainability process, or your project is going to be sustainable in terms of, even if your project is only 1 year or 2 years, the communities will have owned the process and they will continue working on a particular intervention, or working on a particular landscape, or even working on conserving a specific species, because they feel that they are part and parcel. They were engaged in the previous conservation projects, and they understand the implications, or they understand the objectives of conserving a site or a species. So it ensures that your initial objective is sustainable. And lastly, it strengthens possibility for future collaboration. So building that relationship between the communities and yourselves as a community, as a conservation manager or as a project manager, you're able to ensure that you will always feel free, or you'll always be welcomed within these communities to conduct conservation projects. So that's what I've shared with you, is one particular aspect of conservation and people, or one of the aspects that is currently really important in the conservation field, ensuring that the human rights are considered as we conduct our conservation activities. So again, looking at that one aspect, we can come now to the conservation challenge and measures of success. So in particularly here, the challenge is mainly how do we as conservationists, or how do you as conservationists, what is one of the main challenges that we face as we work with the local communities? And one of them is to effectively and fairly manage competing human demands on land, water, and natural resources without undermining crucial ecosystem functions. So this means that as much as we're trying to conserve wetlands, or as much as trying to conserve the flyways and birds or species, we have, as conservationists, we have the challenge of trying to effectively and fairly manage the resources, at the same time ensuring that local communities' livelihoods are not affected. Local communities are part and parcel of our activities. And in this case, different regions, different countries, different continents have different way of engaging local communities, or different ways of how they ensure that there's that balance between people and between conservation objectives. And then when it comes to conservation success, this is judged not only by biodiversity impacts, but also according to social impacts, equitable and sustainable development. Again, as I said earlier, trying to balance between conservation activities and trying to balance that with the social impacts that we bring in, or conservation activities bring into the communities. It's challenging, but at the same time, when we are able to balance, or when we're able to show that we've conserved a wetland, but at the same time, we've helped the community to be able to maintain, or to be able to have continuous access of either water or resources from this wetland that they've been depending on, is very critical, and it's a way of showing a success of your conservation activities. So in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say here is one challenge is trying to balance between community activities or community livelihoods and the demands of land and water and natural resources. But at the same time, if you're able to balance that, then we can be able to mark a conservation success by showing that we've been able to impact the communities socially, and also we've conserved the resources as required. So this takes me to the feedback from the first activity that we did. I don't know, Vivian, how we are going to do. Should we go randomly, group 1, 2, 3, 4, or do you have any format of how we can get feedback? And this is, let me just, this is not, there's no right or wrong answer. So feel free to just go on and just share with us what you had discussed in your groups, and then we can go on with the rest of the slides.
Yeah, maybe you can pick one number from 1 to 4, and then I can do share screen of that group.
Okay, so I'll start with group 3.
Or maybe we can also invite people from group 3 to share, because it's quite empty here. Maybe they're more on talking.
Yeah, so maybe anyone.
Thank you. Sorry that time lapse before we just oriented ourselves on how we should tackle this, but we were able to answer question number 2. And this was about that all the project activities or the ideas that you have being accepted by the local community, because at the end, if they don't accept it, I think it won't end up for you having the positive impact. And then about number 2 is if that community is against the project that you have, and you find that at some extent they may even kind of maybe if there are some maybe structures that you are putting in place, you find that at the end of the day they go and destroy because they don't want anything what you are saying or what you are orientating them to do. Number 3, if they have denied, that is how might conservation activities positively affect the local community. If there are some gains that you are denying them some gain that things that they used to gain, and then you kind of either you alter the gain or you deny them, then at the end of the day, sorry, I'm answering number 4. That is number 4. And we are in number 3. If there are some gains, unadded gains they are getting, then they may end up supporting what you are saying. And number 4, it's kind of an against. If maybe there are some gains that there are some achievement that they used to have, and the project or the activities that you have are denying them, then at the end they may be affected negatively. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Can we also get feedback from group 2?
Hello, good afternoon. So I'm from group 2. I'm Liwal from Philippines. So our answers are are presented in screen now. So in the first question, so we answered households near nature reserves are critical stakeholders in biodiversity conversation because they are concerned with the tension between the environmental protection and the community development. So with this, the resident of the community will now be well aware of the importance of on what we are conserving or what our objectives of, and as a result, our efforts will be effective if our efforts will be effective. So these efforts also intends to promote the responsible use of the area's natural resources and to support informed conservation efforts of on what species we are trying to conserve. So also the information gathered will also serve as the baseline for governments to effectively lead, because poor governance will lead into a negative impact because even though your efforts are well prepared, but with poor governance there will be conflicts that will arise at the process. So that also leads to the second question: how might the local people negatively affect the success of the conservation? So first is the fisheries and agricultural livelihoods, because if we pinpoint an area to be conserved, so it's possible that tourism will either stop or grow, dependent on the depend on how do you call that? Dependent on the style or the type of conservation outline, or kung how yeah. Sorry. So also the locals will see outside the values of conflicts affecting their personal lives. So yes, as I said on the first question, they are the number one stakeholders. So their lives will be affected on how we conserve that area, on what kind of conservation efforts that we will apply. So let's move on to the third question: how might the conservation activities possibly affect the local people. So we answer that local people can get some benefits, such as improvement in their economic through ecotourism. And next is different livelihoods, and through conservation efforts activities, species are secured, thereby improving the ecotourism. So like the other mom, Mercy said that we can say that the more species present in the area, we can say that the environment is healthy. So it also gives a positive effect on the livelihood because more natural resources can be gathered in that area due to its healthy environment. So lastly, and how might conservation activities affect negatively the local people, so human and animal conflict. So one example is that the issue in Monkey Island in Indonesia, like the overcrowded number of monkeys in one specific city in Indonesia due to its large population. So the ratio between monkeys and the population of uh, the people is much higher compared sa normal population ng city. So I think that's all for the group 2. Thank you.
Thank you for your feedback and the discussion. Let's go to group number 4 to quickly give us their feedback, summary of their feedback.
Thank you. I think I'll be speaking on behalf of Group 4, and thanks for letting me speak here. So I'm starting off with question number 1, and how local people can positively affect the success of conservation activities. So what we have found from our active participation is that the local community can participate in conservation programs, obviously, like when you are building awareness, or when, for example, when you educate the youth, they can make it more sustainable and they can help in your conservation activities. And they can also help us to pitch the conservation works to the government, like if a conservation activity is helping them positively, then most definitely they can work as agents to speak to the government. And conservation efforts are collective efforts, so obviously it must engage them. And by supporting the enhancement of the habitat, they are dependent on for economic purposes. That is, for example, like if a community is dependent on wetland, the grasses of the wetland, for example, as we seen here in Bangladesh, that the tall grasses, they use those grasses for several livelihood purposes. So if you want to enhance the habitat in a sustainable way, then they may help support it for also for their benefits. And how might local people negatively affect the success of conservation activities, which was the question 2. So they might oppose the idea of conservation if it goes against them, most obviously. For instance, if you are trying to work in a wetland that they use for fishing, and you want to take it as a protected area, then it might influence their income. So they might oppose, and it can negatively affect the conservation success. Similarly, their livelihoods rely on natural resources and may harmful to the existing biodiversity, which is a similar idea. And local people may not want to stop activities. Similarly, like if you are working with the grasses that surround the wetland, and if they're dependent on those grasses for for their daily living activities, they may not want to stop their activities. And if they are not educated enough, then they might oppose, and that can negatively affect the success of the conservation. And moving on to the question number 3, how might conservation activities positively affect the local people? When we start a conservation activity in an area, then many more livelihood options might come forward. Like if you are starting ecotourism, then maybe it can provide livelihood for more people, and they can get alternative income similarly. And secondly, it can increase the empowerment of women, like in many developing countries or underdeveloped countries, you can see that the status of women are still not very well in the society. But when you start a conservation activity, you actually must involve women too, and which can actually empower them. And so moving on to the question number 4, which is how might conservation activities negatively affect the local people? Conservation activities might in some cases cause restriction to the resources they are dependent on, like many localities that live adjacent to wetlands, they might be very much dependent on the wetlands. So it can actually bring a great change to their daily activities, and it can restrict their access to the area. That's all from us, the group number 4. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. I know we are running a bit late, and we have one more group to go. That is group 1. So just to ask group 1, whoever is going to present, quickly just go through your points. And if there's anything that has been mentioned by the 3 groups, feel free to skip and just go to the new points that you have, any new information or any new discussion that you have, to try and save some time.
Okay, I will be the one to discuss on behalf of group 1. So on number 1, we answered, our answer basically tells us that if the people are aware of the conservation efforts of the conservationists, they could help by becoming one of the conservationists. They could participate in the conservation efforts, and they can also be one of the stewards. They can check if some local policies are being established for the good of the conservation efforts. Number 2, I think the answer here is that if people will not participate on the conservation efforts, they could be bribed with money. And number 3 is that one of us answered that in their area in Hong Kong, I think, fishermen who participate in conservation efforts, who collaborate with the advocacies of their government, are being rewarded with money, and that helps in their economy. And number 4, this basically means that it is a common scenario where people who are active in conservation efforts are being targeted by some companies. And what happens is that there is this kind of a race thing, that whoever goes to the local area and tries to tell the people what their plans for the specific area is, would be the one to really make changes in the area. For example, people in area A, some companies will visit that area, and then they will tell the people that there will be some groups of conservationists that will tell you that you should do this, you should do that. No, what you should do is that you should follow, you should help us instead. You should allow our company to make changes in your area, and we will give you a good sum of money, and then we will give you some opportunities for jobs. But what those people don't know is that those jobs are not self-sufficient for their families. So that is the summary of the answers of group 1.
Okay, thank you for the summary, and thank you all for taking time to go through your feedback. And it's clearly, let me share my screen actually. Yeah, it's good to see that you had different discussion or different points that came up to your discussion. And this is just, whatever I'm sharing is just some of also additions to what we might see as positive and negative effects of people on conservation, as you had previously mentioned. So I won't go through this. This is just, I'll share with you my presentation to go through my points, but technically or basically this is the same information that you have shared within your projects, within your groups. And also when it comes to the positive and negative effects of conservation on people, these are some of the points that I had listed. And one of them that I think has not been made, I've not seen from the 4 presentation is the capacity building. So most of the projects or most of the conservation initiatives nowadays involve the element of capacity building. This can involve either training the local communities or giving them resources in terms of either if it's a bird project, local communities are given or they've given the resources like binoculars to be able to use them for bird watching or for them to be able to understand the different species within their locality when it comes to bird identification. So I'll share with you my slides and you can be able to go back and just add more information or get some insights about the impacts of conservation and to people and vice versa. So when it comes to conditions that influence conservation outputs, so this is more of like what factors and circumstances do you think influence outcomes of conservation initiatives that involve local communities? So there are different factors that affect conservation initiatives, and I'll try to quickly go through some of them. In summary, as I said, this is a few days workshop, but then I'll try and summarize them within the next few minutes that we have. So one of the implications is about ethical and pragmatic reasons to understand and address potential impacts of conservation on people. So as conservationists, we need to understand the social context in which people live, work, and relate to the environment, and know how different people within a community value and use resources to make their living. At the same time, enable people to engage as partners in decisions about conservation initiatives. We addressed this one especially during my previous slides on free, prior, informed consent aspect. So these are some of the implications for conservationists to consider, or for even you as young people who are working on conservation initiatives to consider before engaging the local communities, trying to understand their social context, trying to understand that local communities are different, or each community has different dynamics, and also trying to ensure that the partners feel as part of the projects to be able to have decisions, or to be able to make decisions based on their understanding. So community and social diversity, people are different from one community, from one another, including within a community. So even if you define a communities as a geographical aspect or a geographical area, even within that geographical area, for example, if you're in Hong Kong, you're in a small community there in Hong Kong, the community on its own has different aspects. This may include differences like age. There are different age group within our communities. Different local communities have different levels of education, different religion, gender, ethnicity, wealth, etc. And all these affect how the community relates, or how the communities have different perspective on conservation. And therefore, these differences affect the way they use the environmental resources and the impacts of conservation on them. When it comes to gender and conservation, again, gender differences, this socially ascribed as roles of men and women, affect the rights, access, knowledge, and power concerning natural resources. So gender is also one of the key aspects, or one of the key issues that affects conservation, because in some communities, women are considered the ones who go to, for example, to the forest to collect firewoods, and therefore they are directly affected if a forest is reduced or degraded or cut down. Then the women will be most affected, because they're the ones who will have to go long distances to collect firewood. They will be the ones who will be affected in like getting the resources to be able to feed their families. And on the other hand, in some communities, men are known to be the ones who are responsible to make decisions when it comes to conservation initiatives or it comes to environmental issues within a community. So again, trying to understand what is the gender difference within your community or within the community that you're working on your conservation initiative is very important for the success of your initiative. So understand what dynamics there are in terms of gender. And we also need to understand and address these differences when planning, implementing, and assessing conservation initiatives or conservation objectives. So this, as I said, gender is different in different countries, regions, communities. So it's important to be able to understand. Another issue that affects conservation is conflict management. And conflict may be created by, for example, competition over limited resources within a community, diverse interests within a community, different values accorded to nature within the same community. And conservation agencies or even conservation managers or people like you, young people working in conservation initiatives, we need to appreciate attitudes, tools, and skills to understand the context in which conservation initiatives take place and to manage conflict. We've had a lot of conservation conflict, for example, between human and wildlife, also within communities, like one community depends on a natural resource, for example, a wetland, and the other community depends on a forest, or there's a community, there's that conflict or struggle or struggle, is it not really struggle, but conflict on the limited resources that a community has. So it's important as you implement your projects, it's important as you work with the community to understand what are the potential areas that can bring conflict within the communities, and to be able to understand how do we manage or how do you want to approach an issue that might, a sensitive issue that might affect your conservation initiatives. And by doing this, we need to have different methods of community engagement, which we'll go through them in my next slides. As I said, methods, we have different methods of how we can engage the community to be able to ensure that they are part and parcel, or they understand the project initiatives that you're working on. So community engagement has been defined differently, and one of the definitions is the process of working collaboratively with and through groups of people affiliated by geographic proximity, special interest, or similar situations to address issues affecting the well-being of those people. And also, community engagement works best where it is an ongoing cumulative process enabling relationship and trust to build and strengthen over time. So in a nutshell, community engagement is a collaborative process. It's an engaging process that involves a community that is affiliated either geographically or with an interest, and ensuring that whatever activity you're doing does not negatively impact the community. So community feeling part and parcel of a conservation initiative. And there are various ways of how we can engage the communities, or how we can ensure that they are part and parcel of your project or the conservation project that you're working on. One of them is focus group interviews or discussion. This is basically a method to ensure that if a community, for example, if I know some countries in Africa, the women and men cannot be in the same discussion traditionally. So we can have, they usually split them, having discussions directly with men and another conversation with women, to be able to get both, to get their both views separately. And this is purely culturally or the way they work as a community. So having the focus group interviews or discussion enables a project manager or a conservation initiative to be able to get both views and to get different perspectives from these different groups. Another way of engaging the communities is through community meetings. These are usually, in some cases, they already exist, and in some cases, it's something that your project initiatives are the ones that are going to initiate the meetings, to be able to again get the information, to be able to get the communities to be part and parcel of your projects. Another way of engaging is through surveys to get their community perspectives and attitudes towards a specific landscape or towards a specific species that you're working on, and also to understand what they feel or what they understand about the conservation initiative that you're bringing on board, that you want to work with them. And linked to that, we can also have something called community mapping. This is, for example, if you're working on a landscape, try to you need to try to understand if this is a landscape that you're working on, how do the communities associate this landscape with their daily lives? You can find a landscape that has a wetland, another one that has a forest, another one that just has a natural area, whether it's a grassland, and then the communities will be able to share with you, or will be able to work with the communities to be able to understand the importance of this particular landscape in their livelihoods. At the same time, how do they depend on it to, for example, to continue to do their activities. And finally, we have one issue of online engagement. This is increasingly gaining attention as most people are now going online, but in some cases, if you work in a rural area, having the online engagement might not be the best option for you. But then it's a method of how to make sure that the communities are part and parcel of the activities that you're working on. And finally, there's this method of stakeholders analysis, trying to understand which stakeholders are important, or your target groups when it comes to the conservation initiative. And I'll specifically go through the stakeholders analysis in my next slide before we get a presentation from George, who is going to share with us his experience with his organization on how they've engaged the communities in Kenya while conserving one of the key biodiversity areas in Kenya, and also critically endangered species in Kenya. So just to give a definition, a stakeholder analysis is a process of identifying target people before the project begins, grouping them according to their levels of participation, interest, and influence in the project, and determining how best to involve and communicate each of these stakeholder groups throughout your project. And the purpose is to identify, as I said, to identify the stakeholders, to help address conflict or issues early on, and to gain early alignment among all stakeholders. So I'll let George now come in before I go to this activity too. So George, you're welcome to share with us your presentation or your case study to be able to understand how you've engaged local communities in Kenya.
And for giving me this opportunity, and I'm going to be the moderator for this workshop from now on, and I would like to introduce the case study speaker, Mr. George. George is the founder of the Crane Conservation Volunteer (CCV) from Kenya, and since April 2015, George has been working with the community around Lake Olosov to share the importance of cranes, and to develop way the community member can coexist with the crane. And then the name of the cranes are the gray crown cranes. It's beautiful with a crest. And as an expert, George is passionate about conserving threatened species around the important ecosystem. During this workshop, he will get the insights regarding how to engage the local communities in the conservation of the migratory waterbirds and wetlands. Now, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. My name again is George Ndung'u Muigai, and I'm from Kenya. And you are welcome as I share the case study, successful case study in the conservation of an endangered species. And I'm the director and the founder of CCV, that is Cranes Conservation Volunteers. And yes, we have a lot to share, but for now, I'll just share an overview or just some key points, what we have done, because every activity has its own story, and the different approaches as we target the impact, the positive impact at the end. So you are welcome. And if you have a question, maybe at the end of my 15 minutes, then you are welcome to answer, and I'm ready to answer you wherever I'm able, and also as we chat. So the next slide. So Cranes Conservation Volunteers, this is a registered community-based organization that focuses the conservation of the gray crowned crane as a flagship species that is under our office. We are located we are in Kenya, the central part of Kenya. And our office is Nyandarua County, Gatimu 1, and then Kisima Estate, and you can see the email address there and the telephone number. So the next slide. So this lake is located in Nyandarua County on the northwestern slopes of Ambadea Ridges. And it also within a close proximity of the second highest point in Africa, that is Mount Kenya. And the height above sea level is 2,300 meters above sea level. That means it's one of the few highlands lakes we have in the whole world. The area that's underwater, it's approximately 43 kilometers square, but the space that is created as a protected wetland in 2018 is 167 kilometers square. But where we have the water, it's about 43 kilometers square. And in 2008, through a research by the experts from the National Museum of Kenya on Ecology section, the area, this lake was designated as an important bird area or the key biodiversity area because of having key species of conservation concern, of its importance in the global arena. For example, it's a wintering ground for Palearctic migrants, those birds that do come from Asian countries and European countries. When it is the weather is not conducive over there, they come all the way to Lake Ouroboros, either as a stopover or as a wintering ground. It has also some key species, like the case study that I'm going to present, the gray crowned crane, which is an endangered species. We also have the sharp-trunk crow, a Kenyan endemic, and also an endangered species. The area around, or the community living around Lake Ouroboros are mainly livestock. I mean, they are farmers, small-scale farmers, and their main activities about crop production at household use, and also they also keep like some livestock. And at some time of the year when it is dry, we have some pastoral communities coming from the drier areas in Kenya, especially from Laikipia. And these communities are the Maasai, as you know, the Maasais, and some of the Sambulus. They come here because, of course, it's a highland area. So when it is dry, the pasture is available somehow throughout the year. So they come from the arid, semi-arid areas all the way to the Ouroboros in search of pasture. So the next slide. Yeah, now let's get to the topic of the day. And as I said, it's a case study for the conservation of an endangered crane. And in the whole world, as you may know, we have 15 species of cranes surviving the world today. And in Africa, you can find 4 of them. And these are we have the gray and the black crowned crane. We have the blue crane and we have the wattled crane. And for the gray crowned crane, that is a case study that I'm going to present here. And according to the conservation status of all the cranes that we have in the world today, surviving the world today, 13 of them are classified in as endangered in the IUCN red data of the threatened species. And one of them, this is the gray crown crane that I'm going to present today. So the next slide. The gray crown crane, you find it in Africa. That means this is an African endemic bird. And it is found in East Africa, going down all the way to South Africa. Although we have the subspecies, we have the East African subspecies, that is a gray crown crane East African subspecies, and we have the Southern African subspecies. But the difference is only, it's not, you may not be able to see physically, but with those that are expert, they're able to know the difference, especially at the red, the physical feature, the difference between the gray crown crane, the East African subspecies and the South African subspecies, mainly is the red between the cheek here and the crown. You're able to see there is a trail of red there. For the East African subspecies, it's a bit larger, but for the South African subspecies, is a little bit smaller. But this you're able only to know for if you are keen to see. That's the only difference. And the one that I'm going to present, this is the East African subspecies. And Kenya has the largest population of this species as we speak now, because 45% of the gray crown crane is found in Kenya. But, and again, the gray crown crane is the most beautiful of all the cranes we have in the whole world. It is the most beautiful and most colorful. And another characteristic is that of all the 15 species we have in the whole world, 2 of them, they have the crest or the crown, as you can see, that hairstyle, which I think even for you, it's something that is beautiful, that crest you see on the head. But the rest, they don't have that crown. And the 2 crowns, the black crown crane and the gray crown crane, they are the most beautiful. But the gray crown crane is reading. But for the last 45 years, the population of these species has gone down by over 80%. The simple calculation is that where we had 100 birds, only 20 are remaining currently. And that is why this resorted to it listed as an endangered species by the International Union of Conservation of Nature. As you can see, a population decline of 45%, then things are not good. So the next slide. If we have a look at the population trend in Kenya, and I said that 45% of the global population of this species is found in Kenya. And then if you look at the population trend, in 1988, it showed through research, it indicated that we have 35,000 individuals in Kenya. In 2015, through a survey and a research kind of the monitoring, it was found that the population of these species in Kenya, it is 25,500. We did a survey, the nationwide survey, which I also participated. And we found that at most we have 10,000 cranes remaining in Kenya. And you can able to project and also think, what about other countries within East Africa? If Kenya has the largest population, 45%, and maybe the same population decline is going down, then you can imagine what has happened to the global population. And in Kenya, maybe you can go to the next slide. In Kenya, we have the kind of the research that we did in 2019. There were 5 counties that were highlighted as the key most, the key most counties that requires conservation intervention for this species. And Lecoroborosat, that is in Nyandarua County, was ranked number 2. Or in the whole country, we have the western population, without a population of cranes in Western Kenya, and another one in the 2 counties that have the largest population of this species. And in 2015, that is, I myself, I did a research or a kind of survey, because for the regional single species action plans, it called for each country to do a kind of or a survey to know, to come up with the reality on the status of the great crown crane in their country. And in Lake Oroborosat, I did a survey just to find out if the main population of Kenya, of the great crown crane in Kenya, one is found in Western Kenya, and the other one is found in the Nyandarua County, the central Kenya, and specifically Lake Oroborosat. And the population of this species is going down. Then what is happening in Lake Oroborosat? So I did a survey to find the status of these, the survival status of these species in Lake Oroborosat. And these are the key threats that I found. And as I said, of course, this is just for today, and maybe in future you may share more. And this, the one that I've highlighted here, specifically is working with the local community. The areas that the local community had a direct negative impact to this species. And we found that, I found that we have a nest failure. A nest failure, this means that from the time that breeding pair starts constructing nests all the way to when it hatches, then there was a problem there. You know, the nest was not successful to produce all, at the end, the chicks to hatch. I also discovered that we have a high rate of juvenile or chick dying. I also found that there were cases of poaching, and this was one of the key areas, was the entry point of the pilot engagement activities that I focused, because as you know, if it's about poaching, then it's a direct removal, either the eggs or the live birds from the wild. And of course, here you are able to think, why were they doing that? As I said, today I'm just sharing an overview. And then I found that there was a degradation of the habitats. And all this, as I said, it's about the local community, threats that came from the local community. I found that we have the degradation of the habitat, either through grazing or through harvesting of aquatic vegetation, either for housing, making maybe baskets, either for the pasture, or just people just destroy, burning without intention. Some of them, they did it with an intention that maybe that native or that notion or that belief that during the dry season, then we can burn this vegetation to kick out, to reduce the load of ticks at the end for the benefit of the livestock. I also found that there were some cases of poisoning, direct poisoning, especially because of crop invasion. Some people thought that the cranes are the ones that are destroying their crop. And again, on the other side, I found that yes, we have conservation policies. They're already in place, but they are not implemented, or they were delayed. Yeah. And then I have found that we don't have. There was no law enforcement, because cases like the poaching in Kenya, it is illegal, not unless you are licensed. But again, that is a hunting. And for the endangered species, you cannot be given permit to do it, but people are doing it. So no law enforcement. And the last one, I found that lack of information. And this is the one that is very, very key, working with the local community. They didn't know what they are doing. They are causing threat to these species, and at the end, population goes down. So the next slide. So these are the pictorial presentation of some of the threats that I have found. As you can see, the one on the left top, this is where the gray-crowned crane lay the nests. They put their nests on the ground, on the wetlands. But because of grazing, or you see at the end, and all these pictures were taken, I've taken them from the lake. At the end, you find that because of the grazing, at the end, on the light top, that is the nest now, totally exposed to predators, you know, no privacy for the breeding pair. And mainly this is because of grazing or overgrazing inside the breeding areas. And Lake Oroborsat, as I said, it's a government land. I can say it's a government-owned land, so it's not a private land. It's a government land, and although steps or the interventions are placed from the government side to highlight more of biodiversity conservation, rather than a benefit to the local community, but it's about the biodiversity protection, which of course will go to line in line with the community benefit, you know, equal utilization of the resource. And down here you can see these are the children. Here in Africa or in Kenya, some children, they just get in the wetland, sometimes for fishing, and at the end, some of them, if they find a crane eggs, they used to pick it, and maybe for either they sell the eggs or they just consume it at the household level. Yeah, so the next slide.
Oh.
Yeah, so thank you. Again, as you can see, we have the livestock here on the left top, and we have a tiny chick. This is a chick that is about not more than 2 weeks old. And if we have the presence of livestock at the end, and again the reeds or the vegetation is totally removed by the cattle, you can see if the cattle are here, they'll trample on the chick, and essentially that chick will die. As I said, one of the things that I found that we have the high level of chick mortality, and these are some of the causes. You can see that we found that also the stray dogs, you see that they were used to, like, if they want to feed, the easy catch is going to the lake, for them to the lake, and they collect the egg, they eat the chicks. Yeah. So the next slide. Now, for the conservation intervention for us now to avert this population trend of the population of the gray-crowned crane going down, for us to recover a population, currently, and maybe I know you'll agree with me, reproduction is very, very key. How successful reproduction of the species will be. And now we came up with an intervention engaging the local community. And as I said, lack of information was mainly the entry point. Awareness creation, because the community, they didn't know that, yes, this is a very, very important important wetland in terms of the cranes. And they had that, there was no, they had no idea. For them, they just seeing the crane, and that is all. And some of the intervention or the approaches that you used is one-on-one. But this one-on-one is basically where are we going to start? Of course, it is not the entire lake. And initially, at the first stage, it's not the entire lake. We focused on especially the key breeding areas. And of course, we had already listed down, these are the threats. And the inducers of threats are these and these people. Like, for example, if it is about the poaching, not every member of the community was doing poaching. So if we have to kind of design, how are we going to change this poaching? The first contact was about the poachers. And then how are we going to approach them? Which message are we going to go to approach them with? Which are the benefits for them? And at the end, all these approaches that I'm going to explain, all of them, we focused on a good relationship with the neighbors, not kind of causing kind of the fear that causes the panic. It just all at the end, we want to be a friend to the local community. And at that friendship will create a platform now for us to channel the ideas and knowledge about the conservation. So we use the one-on-one awareness. That is, if it's about the grazer, then we just go and sit with them down as they graze, and then we discuss about the conservation of the species, conservation of the whole biodiversity. But of course, with this kind of an idea that we don't want to cause any panic or fear to this guy. At the end, we want to be afraid of that guy or that person who is doing that. And at the end, will not feel that I'm intimidated or cause fear. I've been doing wrong and I'll be maybe arrested. No, that's why I'm saying that the approach is very, very important. And as you engage with them, we also had some community workshops. Maybe if it's about the poachers, and we know these are the key people who are doing this, and of course, it's not easy for them now to invite them that we know you are poachers, and for them, in one way or another, they do it's illegal, so they cannot come for the workshop. So one of the strategies that we use that we know that you guys, we know you are fishermen, because at the end, cranes are found in the wetland. And if they are going for poaching, then they go into the wetland. So we invited, we organized for a workshop for the fishermen, not for the poachers. But back in our mind, we knew this, because at the end, during the survey, was able to identify at this area, this is the person that does the poaching. And the most experienced person, that is a person that I was invited in a workshop, is a fisherman. And they do came. And at the end, there was kind of an alternative livelihood for them. So those are kind of the workshop that we used to organize, maybe for the village elders, for the maybe for the students. Another approach about the awareness creation, that was the lectures during the village meetings. And there was something that Mercy said that taking maybe an advantage of an organized meeting, because maybe in our case, if you invite people for a meeting just to talk about the biodiversity conservation, they may not value conservation more than their daily livelihood activities. Maybe you find somebody is a farmer and it's not easy for him now to set a day. Now, this day, I'm going for a conservation lectures or the conservation workshop, and I stopped working in my garden. So we used, and until now, we use the already organized meetings. Like maybe we have the village, the chief of the area, or maybe we have, maybe there is a certain village. Every month they meet. So we discuss and we request for the organizer to give an opportunity to talk about the conservation. And then we are there and then we do the conservation lectures. But of course, everything is strategically arranged. This level from one level to another. There's some information that we cannot reveal at the day one of the meeting. Maybe we can only reveal at day 5 of the meeting, because if we release some information, they may be somehow, you know, as it is said, literal knowledge is very dangerous. They may learn to do things, you know, or have a zeal of conservation, but they do it in the wrong way. So it's a strategic sharing of information as we advance with the local community and also the kind of the people that we are working with, you know, the target audience. We also designed the vernacular brochures. People living around Lake Oroborosat, mainly they are Kikuyu. So we designed some brochures with good stories, the importance of birds in our society. Like, for example, they are beautiful. You know, they control the load of insects. Yeah, those kind of good stories, positive side. And at the end, we touch on the conservation needs for the great crown crane. Another approach is that we zoned the breeding sites, because we had discovered that cranes don't breed everywhere, but there are some key territories. There are some key territories that they use. So, and these are the livestock that used to go there and they drop on the eggs, they remove all the vegetation, aquatic vegetation. So now we had to sit down with the local community and discuss that here, for now, because of the reason of these and these and these and these are the benefits, for now, maybe for 3 months, let us not allow our livestock to go and graze there. So the next slide. We also had this program on monitoring breeding pairs, or of course, where we have the nest, then we identify a custodian, and this person might be a grazer, that maybe you don't allow your livestock to go there, and maybe you can giving us, just report to us the progress of that nest or that chick, how things are going. If there are threats, then you can ask us the intervention. Some of them will go there, or that grazer himself, he has to intervene. We also organize for awareness workshop for the key people at the breeding territories. That is for for the grazers and the fishermen, because they are within the wetland area. We also had some for the village elders, because they are the custodian of they kind of manage the village affairs. So if they're equipped with the knowledge about conservation needs for the cranes, when they have the village meetings, then they are able to discuss with the local with the villagers that we have a problem here, and please don't do this and this and this, but you can do this and this and this to promote the conservation of these species. We also had an alternative livelihood for the poachers, because when we are classifying the poachers during the survey, there were those people that was the only way for them to get livelihood. So we had now to find a way, because you are looking for the eggs, you are looking for the the poultry meat, or for the wild or the bird's meat or the wildfowl meat. Then we can offer you a skills on how to raise your own chicken and also how to get your own eggs, but not for every poacher. This was for those that maybe they are very needy. If you tell them don't go and catch the birds, not unless you give them an alternative, they'll keep on doing that. We also had that is a platform for information sharings. Anything that is unique about the cranes from the local community, we created a platform where they can share with us. If it's about the threat, it's about the sighting, they can just share with us, and then for us, that information, we're able to translate it or do a conservation intervention. And then we had now the formation of cranes conservation volunteers that coordinates applied approaches around Lake Oroborosat. And now even it is beyond the lake. Beyond this lake, we have the neighboring countries, even sometimes in Tanzania. We also had a scholarship program for the just kind of to promote, to promote the good attitude toward the cranes. We had now to find resources to offer kind of pay school fees for a needy, a bright student, but very, very needy from the villagers. And for one of the strategies to identify this student is using the, involving the local community. Some of them you find that it's the local community that do fundraise, or the villagers do fundraise for their school fees. So if you remove that burden for that year, then we sit down then with them that the side of bargain on your side, then help us to do A and B and C. And at the end, you find that at the end, we shall have already transformed the local community that are causing threat to this species. If the next slide. Achievement so far, because of these applied approaches, we are able now to discover and map key site for the cranes, and we have the available data now. We know they are breeding here and there and there, and also about the data about the cranes. It is already, and the community, they are informed now about the crane, about the call for protection of this species. All around the lake, they are aware, so they cannot say that we are not informed. They are informed about it, and they also participate. They participate in protection, maybe reporting to CCV Secretariat, or we have an injured bird, we have a nest somewhere, or uncommon flocking of the cranes, etc. And we have now another achievement, it's about the formation of the cranes conservation volunteers. And we also already have an office where I'm talking from, and it's coordinating different programs in Nyandarua County and neighboring counties, and even sometimes we are given an opportunity to go and empower other CBOs on the species conservation. Like I'm here, we are sharing the information, so it's an achievement. Now the poachers also, they are transformed. They are no longer poaching, and now they are cranes conservationists. When they see maybe a nest, instead of collecting those eggs and selling and eating, they are the people that are reporting, well, we have a nest here, and then they follow up the progress of that nest all the way to chicks get to fledge. And again, we have an increased chicks, the fledging of the chicks. And here I have a kind of a data. We started in 2015, 2016. The number of chicks that fledged or reached maturity or flying age in 2016, 2015, 2016. I'm saying 2015, 2016 period because here in Lake Ouroboros, they start breeding in June all the way to February, March there, depending on the amount of the rainfall that we may get. So that is why I'm saying, because when it starts in June, like this year, 2022, breeding will end 2023 around February, May. And in 2015, 2016, we recorded 0. I remember very well that the last chick that we had hope that this one will fetch, going there, a grazer told me that some boys came and ran after the chick and picked it and went away with it, but of course for eating. So that was 0. In 2016, that is when we started conservation intervention, and we recorded 1 chick. Coming 2017, 2018, then we recorded 56 chicks that fledged from the lake. And now 2018, 2019, we recorded 88 chicks having fledged in the lake. So it's an addition in the wild. So we can say that maybe in Lake Ouroboros, the population might be going down. Might be going up instead of downward trend that used to be there. So the next trend, because of time, slide. The major challenge, among others, but the major challenge that we experienced was about the community hostility because of the perception of the human-wildlife conflict. Because we have a lot of hippos in Ouroboros, and they usually come out of the lake and invade the crops. So now George coming here and telling the local community that it is good to protect the wildlife, and then the other side, the same wildlife, it is destroying the crops. So initially it was a hostility, but now we had to design how are we going to make friendship with these people? And at the end, they are ready to listen. And we transform them that now, wildlife is good. And these are the benefits, not only the negatives of the wildlife. They need to know the positive side of the wildlife. And that is why I say one of the threats or I found was about the lack of information. They only see one end, one phase of the hippo. They don't, or the wildlife in general. They don't see the other part, the good part, or the benefits of the wildlife. So it was kind of a challenge, but as we advanced, they started, understanding, and all this is about awareness creation. The next slide. And thank you. And that is my end of my presentation. I know time is not on our side. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, George. Nice presentation, and we have learned a lot about. So I am from developing country, and we have the same issue, how to engage the local community in very much. And so we are running a little bit behind the schedule. So before the first again, because at the beginning of the workshop, some of the participants are not in the photo. So I would like to kindly request all the participants to turn on your video. And Vivian, could you please take the photo and could you pass me? But my connection is not so good.
Yes. Okay. We also lost a few people, but yeah, everyone please turn on your video so that we can take a photo. And after that, I think Mercy also wanted to do some wrap up with her section. So after this photo taking, we will go back to Mercy for the wrap up. So are you all okay? Okay, just a few more. Suyu and Xiaolong, maybe you can also share your camera so that we can all see you. Great. Okay, Xiaolong, you're shy maybe. Okay, I will do screenshots then. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, just so to play safe, one more. 1, 2, 3, smile. Great, thanks. And shall we pass over to Mercy again to go over a few points for the last sessions? Yeah, thank you for all for staying. So yeah, and yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you, Vivian. I'll go. I had several slides, but I'll go through. We'll go through some of them tomorrow, but for now, I'll just take you through some of just 2 slides that you. Let me put it. Yeah, just go through like 2 different questions that you might ask when you want to engage local communities. But first of all, I'd like to give thanks to George for giving us that insightful presentation on how you've engaged the local communities, and also some of the challenges that you've faced so far, and the achievements that you've gotten so far since 2015. And it's for your case study is an example of how engaging communities is not usually a straightforward aspect. It's a step-by-step activity, and also it's a continuous activity that conservation activities or conservation projects needs to consider while engaging the local communities. So just to come back to my presentation, and I have come up with like different questions that you might want to ask during the implementation of your various conservation projects that you want to engage the local communities. So one of them is, are all social groups participating? This can be like different age groups, elderly, the young people, different people who like different people with different levels of education or even wealth. Who has been excluded and why? Have you excluded women? Why are the women not involved in your project? Or why are the young people not involved in your project? Is there a particular reason that it's hindering them to be part of the project? Are any other group or groups dominating? In some cases, you might find that mostly men are the ones who dominate most of the conservation activities or most of the activities that organizations or conservation organizations bring to the communities. So try to ensure that it's not, your conservation activities are not dominated by one particular group. What are the costs of participation? Do the communities have to contribute financially, their time, any kind of resources? So trying to understand what cost is it going to impact, or what kind of impact are the communities going to have in terms of their participation? And then the other question is more of, do relations between social groups affect the project? So there's communities that have like distinct difference between the wealth and the less fortunate people. Is that affecting how your project is going to run? And then are there any new external factors affecting the social relations? This can be things like political issues, or it can be environmental issues. Is it affecting how the social relation between the different groups affect your community? And then finally, are there key social groups? Are key social groups supportive of the program or initiative? And do they want to change it? Who want to change it, how and why? So these are just some of the examples that you need to probably consider when you want to engage the local communities to participate in your conservation projects. And finally, I would like to take you through what are some of the questions about socially differentiated impact might you want a project monitoring mechanism to answer. So as an example, how do different social groups benefit from the program? Are there any social groups being negatively impacted by the program? And also, have relations between women and men changed as a result of the program? And also, have power relations in the community been affected by the project or the program? So these are some of the examples that you'll want to answer when you're monitoring, or when you've reached a time when you want to evaluate what are the impacts of your community-led projects to the community. So these are just an example of ways or questions that you'll want to ask yourself to be able to know how effective you've been able to engage the communities and how you've affected them socially, and also their livelihoods, and also how you've affected or how you've achieved your conservation objectives. And I think that's it for today. The remaining of I have still some slides, but I think these are the slides we'll be able to run them through tomorrow, as most of them are a bit more of the wrap up from when we started up to now. And there's one more activity that I had planned that you're going to do today, but due to time, I think we can easily connect it with our tomorrow's activities, since you're going to get more case studies from different projects, and those case studies are going to be linked to the question or the activity that I wanted you to take part today. So I think that's it from me today. And thank you so much, everyone, for your participation. And I hope that you've gotten one or two things from this presentation. And I don't know, Vivian, if you'll have some few minutes for questions and answer, or how do we go from now, knowing that we are already 15 minutes past the hour. So thank you, everyone.
Yes, just in case there is some burning questions that you wanted to ask, or you are not clear, you can either raise it in the chat box here in the Zoom, or you can just speak it out. And yeah, so any burning questions? Or we will continue tomorrow. So yeah, you can also raise it tomorrow as well. And if not, then maybe Yeonju and Thura have some wrap up and housekeeping notes for everyone. So over back to you, Thura and Yeonju.
Thank you, Vivian, and thank you, Marcy, and thank you all for all participated in our first day of the training workshop. Marcy presentation will be continued tomorrow morning, and we have another 3 interested case study. So we will continue the workshop tomorrow, and we will see you tomorrow at the ended workshop, and we will use the same thing, and who are also the member of our organization. For my role as the moderator, I have nothing to say. Why not? And see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for the participation.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot, Mercy, and thanks, George, for your really detailed presentation. That's really good that we understand more. Although it is a different Flyway project, so it's also we experience a similar threats and challenges. It's a really good sharing and case studies that we can learn from you today. And for participants, tomorrow we will also use your case study for analysis as well. So thanks a lot, everyone.